Welcome back to today's Explainer. So we're doing a bit of financial sleuthing today. We're going to dive deep into the for-profit education industry, pulling back the curtain on how these institutions actually operate. And we're not doing this by looking at their glossy promotional brochures. We're doing it by following the money right on their balance sheets.
And it all boils down to one absolutely crucial question. Where does the money actually go? Think about it. When someone pays their tuition or takes out a massive student loan to cover their fees, how is that institution actually spending those dollars? Are they investing in the student's mind, or are they just investing in acquiring the next student? It's a huge distinction, and trust me, it's one that savvy investors and regulators are watching like a hawk.
Okay, so let's establish the basic business model of for-profit education. Straight from the SASB industry standards, it is a very simple equation. For-profit education entities that grow the number of students they admit and enroll will increase their revenue. It's a pure volume game. More students equals more tuition, which equals more revenue. Now, there's obviously nothing inherently wrong with growth, but this specific financial structure sets the stage for a very particular set of budget priorities.
Which leads us directly to what we can call the temptation. Because revenue is so literally tied to enrollment numbers, institutions face this constant driving pressure to just keep growing. And how do you guarantee growth? Well, you adopt aggressive recruitment strategies. You spend massive amounts of money on marketing and advertising. But here's the catch. If you have a finite pool of capital, spending heavily on your sales machine means you inevitably deprioritize the actual product. You end up starving the instruction and the student services.
Now, this tension isn't just some abstract theory we're kicking around. It is a highly quantifiable financial risk. Global investors actually rely on the SASB standards framework to track exactly how these institutions behave. By dedicating specific metrics directly to marketing and recruiting practices, investors know that how a school balances its budget reveals its true priorities and ultimately its long-term viability.
The real battleground here lies in a very specific metric, SVED 278.3. This standard essentially forces institutions to put their cards on the table by pitting two distinct budgets against each other. On one side, you have instruction and student services expenses, and on the other, marketing and recruiting expenses. Demanding this clear separation gives us a completely transparent view into where the capital is actually flowing.
Let's actually break these two buckets down so we know exactly what we're looking at. The first bucket is instruction and student services. According to the standard, this includes literally all expenses that directly support educational quality or provide related services to current students. This is the money spent on the people who are already inside the building, right? It's the investment in the actual delivery of the education that was promised to them. Now pivot over to the second bucket, marketing and recruiting expenses. This includes recruiter salaries, advertising expenses, compensation for marketing staff, and big brand promotion campaigns. Notice the difference there. Not a single dollar in this bucket goes toward educating a current student. This entire budget is focused outward. It's designed exclusively to acquire new students and drive up that enrollment revenue we talked about earlier.
This contrast becomes fascinating when you put the actual line items side by side. On the left, you've got concrete educational assets, faculty compensation, course materials, laptops, classroom rent, career services, the stuff that actually makes a student successful. On the right, you have recruiter salaries and advertising campaigns. Think about it. If a school is paying its recruiters more than its faculty or spending more on ad campaigns than on lab supplies, that tells a very, very specific story about their underlying business model.
Let's visualize how these total expenditures interact. Imagine an animated pie chart breaking this all down. If the slice containing recruiter salaries and massive brand promotion campaigns starts aggressively eating into the slice reserved for faculty pay, classroom facilities, and educational equipment, well, you're looking at an institution that is starving its classrooms to feed its sales funnel. Looking at a pie chart breakdown like this is honestly the fastest way to gauge if a school genuinely prioritizes educational quality or if it's just chasing enrollment numbers.
And the stakes here? They're incredibly high, and they go way beyond internal budgeting. As the SASB standard explicitly warns, and I quote, "Aggressive recruiting practices have resulted in additional public and regulatory scrutiny of for-profit education entities. When your sales targets start totally eclipsing your graduation rates, regulators notice. The public notices, and the fallout for the institution could be absolute disaster."
So what does that fallout actually look like? Well, when the pressure to recruit hits a boiling point, institutions run the massive risk of using false or misleading advertisements. That triggers significant regulatory fines and huge legal losses. But it gets even worse. Bad practices can lead to a complete loss of eligibility for government-funded student aid, which is literally the lifeblood of many of these schools.
And if government funding dries up, schools might be incentivized to mislead students into taking out predatory private loans they simply cannot repay. It just creates this terrible cycle of high student debt and loan defaults that ends up destroying the school's reputation and finances.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for today's explainer. When you are evaluating a for-profit educational institution, you absolutely have to look past the slick marketing. You have to ask yourself, does the institution's budget actually reflect educational quality, or is it just a massive sales machine? By demanding transparency between instruction expenses and recruiting expenses, we can actually see the truth. Thank you so much for joining me today to unpack this. Keep following the money, and I'll see you in the next explainer.